A year after the insurrection, the investigation into what happened and those responsible continues. More than 150 of those involved have already been prosecuted. Hundreds more await trial. But what is far from decided is the political responsibility and ramifications for American democracy. On the eve of the one-year anniversary of the violent attempt to overthrow the election results of the 2020 presidential election, the US's top lawyer said there's no higher priority than holding all those accountable.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. We will follow the facts wherever they lead.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The unanswered question 1 year on is how, who, and to what extent the administration of then-President Donald Trump is to blame for the insurrection and those behind-the-scenes attempts to overturn the election. A U.S. congressional investigation into that very question has faced opposition and obstruction from many former Trump officials. Then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is facing criminal contempt charges for failure to fully cooperate. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon too. Others have handed over documents and text message records which suggest to some members of Congress a pattern of planning for what became the riot at the Capitol, an attempt at persuasion to overturn the legitimacy of the election.
But I will read a few of them. Mark, one member said, he needs to stop this now. In all caps, tell them to go home. POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed.
Former President Trump has abruptly cancelled a planned press conference on the anniversary of the insurrection, just as more evidence comes to light of potential involvement of his administration and allies in the Republican Party and the media in planning and directing the events that led up to that fateful day. President Biden will deliver remarks as planned. But beyond who was to blame, both on the ground here and politically, on the January 6th insurrection, coup, riot, whatever you want to call it, there are bigger questions in American politics too. The majority of Republicans still think that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, that the election was stolen. And we're seeing similar divisions in US democracy when it comes to something so simple as getting vaccinated against COVID. What happened here on January the 6th was essentially a microcosm of what is plaguing US democracy. Nathan King, CGTN, outside the US Capitol.
There's definitely some political divide happening in our country right now. That's going to take some time to get over what happened. Obviously, with the year anniversary coming up, it's a good remembrance for what happened, and hopefully it's an opportunity for us to heal as a country and remember what happened that day and the lives that were lost, and hopefully we can use that as something to come together.
I'm not a citizen of this country, but I still feel like it's more divided than last year. I feel like there's still a lot of people who have not changed their minds in the last years about a lot of things, be that racial justice or COVID or any of the other issues, the election.
Probably have always just been divided, but no one really just talked about it as much, and now people feel like they have a platform, so it seems like we're more divided, but it's probably always just been like this.
No, I think it's more divided. I think you've got people on both sides who just don't want to listen to the other side, which I think is important. Even though you don't agree with people, we're not even listening. Do I worry about it? No, because I try to not, I try to live in the present, but I do hope that we can become a more united society. I don't know. I just hope.
I really believe that this country has been divided since the Trump administration, and after Biden was elected, it still has a little sense of division. But I believe that America has the power and the control in order to surpass that division and in order to be like it used to be in past years.
Well, 1 year after the January the 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, a poll shows that Americans are pessimistic about the future of democracy. The poll conducted by National Public Radio and Ipsos found that 64% believe U.S. democracy is in crisis and at risk of failing. It added that this sentiment is felt most by Republicans. 2/3 of Republican respondents agreed with the false claim that Joe Biden won the 2020 elections with the help of voter fraud. Fewer than half of these respondents say they are willing to accept the election results. And nearly 2/3 of those polled agreed the U.S. democracy is more at risk now than it was a year ago. Overall, 70% said the U.S. as a nation is in crisis and at risk of failing.
Well, across the political spectrum, most Americans believe democracy is in trouble. And this has increased reactionary partisanship in many places, leading to more polarization. Now, on the one hand, politicization and some amount of polarization are common in a two-party system like the U.S., and even more so when faced with crises like the pandemic. On the other hand, it's clear there are deep systemic problems and declines with intersections across the three branches of government: a Congress unable to effectively legislate, a president unable to effectively rulemaking and execute, and a Supreme Court that's being forced undemocratically to fill in the gaps left by the two other branches while being ideologically out of step with the majority of the U.S. population. Now, this isn't how the system was designed to work, but this trend has been in place and worsening for more than 2 decades and accelerating during the Trump and Biden years.
Now it's 1 year after the riot at Capitol Hill. There is a new administration in power. So why do you think American people still worry their political system?
Well, on the one hand, most Republicans are split on what happened last year. Well, some find it horrifying, and many believe it wasn't so serious, that it's being inflated for political purposes. Others think it was justified and even support violence against the federal government. And a few still seem to believe it was instigated by leftists in order to embarrass Trump and the Republicans. In the meantime, we find Republican obstructionism to congressional inquiries, and at the state level, where Republicans hold power, attempts to tighten voting rights and strip independent election commissions of power. On the other hand, while many Democrats were euphoric with Biden's victory, they have fractured over his performance. His approval ratings are low, he's weak, the economy is in trouble, inflation is soaring, and more people have died from COVID during his time in office than during Trump's. Now, what people on both sides have in common is they are suffering. They are deeply frustrated with a system that is unable to solve problems that are impacting everyone. Consequently, there's no trust across the spectrum and very little within groups that align with each other. Unfortunately, there's no political leader yet, I think, who's demonstrated a capacity for transcending this morass and leading a durable majority forward.
Right, and about the influence on America last year when the riot happened, a lot of people were asking, where does America go from there? Do you think there is an answer to that question now?
We're still trying to digest and figure out what really happened last year during the riot. It's clearly a significant historical event, one that will be remembered and discussed for a long time to come, but it's still too soon to discern the arc of its significance. In part, this is because it was a political riot and an attack against Congress, and it's still being digested by this extremely polarized country. Now, my sense is that it will be remembered as a milestone of a country in crisis and decline, but whether it's assessed as a turning point or just another step downward remains to be seen.
With regards to the impact globally, Professor, as what you said, polarization is quite common in two-party systems, and we also see that far-right forces do exist in many other countries. So do you see similar incidents like the Capitol riot happen in other countries?
Well, let's be clear. There are people who are concerned that we may see more political violence in the U.S. itself, that especially with the midterm elections coming in November, we're going to continue to see this polarization roiling the U.S. As to whether or not we're seeing this as a harbinger of what's happening elsewhere, clearly there are some places where democracy or the political systems are even less stable. I won't name names, but there are countries in Europe, in South America, and Africa, and a lot of them There are rightists in those countries, right wing, even fascist and neo Nazis, who are looking to the United States, who are looking to the right wing movements in the U.S. As signalers, and this remains, I think, a significant risk for people around the world, and will need to be forcibly countered sooner or later.
Right, and very briefly, Professor, President Biden is going to deliver a speech on the one-year anniversary of the Capitol riot. What do you expect him to say?
You know, the veneer of his remarks will be national unity and the sanctity of American democracy, praising its durability while calling for its protection and reinforcement. But make no mistake, his real purpose here is to hammer Trump and the Republicans, to blame them for the attack, and by extension, a bevy of problems. And this is just the first of many events being sequenced by Democrats this year, including hearings in Congress designed to wring as much political value as possible from the attack ahead of midterm elections in November, where Democrats will face a very significant risk of losing control of the House and Senate.